Does your offer to Caitlin still stand? And do you have a message for her if she's on the fence?
Yes, it does still stand. If she's on the fence, we could talk about anything that's concerning her. I think we will accommodate her in any way, shape, or form.
I've had a lot of fun, being in the spotlight and helping grow this game and move it forward, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. But I think I know firsthand how talented this league is.
Caitlin Clark could have been an instant multimillionaire after getting an offer of $10 million from Ice Cube to play in the Big Three League. But she rejected that offer despite earning a WNBA salary that doesn't even scratch the surface of what she could have been making in the Big Three. And while the money conversation will always be there, some people think that Clark made the biggest mistake of her career when she turned that offer down. So, was Caitlin Clark actually wrong for turning down that huge deal with the Big Three? Stick around to find out if she made the biggest mistake of her basketball career. The rise of basketball throughout the world has turned this sport into a truly global phenomenon. Of course, while we can't deny that the sport is growing in different countries, it's still bigger than ever in the United States, especially with the rise of professional leagues other than the NBA. One such league is the Big Three, a 3-on-3 league co-founded by hip-hop icon and actor Ice Cube. The league consists of 12 teams with rosters that include former NBA players and other international basketball icons. It's the very fact that these teams have legendary names that allows the Big Three to profit. The league even sold its first franchise in 2024 for $10 million. Speaking of $10 million, the league tried to go all in on one of the most popular athletes who proved herself worth every penny with how she's been taking the basketball world by storm. Caitlin Clark, just a few months ago, completed one of the most successful college careers we've ever seen in the history of the sport. She's become the highest-scoring female college basketball player of all time, and even broke Pete Maravich's long-standing NCAA record for career points for both men and women. But her records were only half of the things that made her incredibly popular. Clark was always a box office sensation in college, drawing some of the biggest crowds and largest viewership numbers in the history of collegiate basketball. The 2024 championship game between Clark's Iowa and South Carolina was the most watched women's college basketball game of all time, drawing an average of 18.7 million viewers, 89% more than the 2023 version. Of course, the common denominator between the two games is Caitlin Clark, the biggest reason why college women's basketball was so big in the last 2 years. The NCAA Division I women's basketball tournament set viewing records across all 6 rounds because they had the biggest draw in women's basketball history. It all boils down to how magnetic Clark's style is. She's not just a pretty face, but is an incredibly talented athlete who oozes charisma with her playing style. Her Steph Curry-like performances and outside shots are some of the most incredible things we've ever seen in basketball. Simply put, she's a box office draw who brings people to her side wherever she goes. Clark made basketball fans of people who've never watched a single basketball game in their lives because of her oozing magnetism. So, it goes without saying that she makes money wherever she goes because people flock to her side almost instantly. This is undoubtedly the biggest reason why Ice Cube offered a huge contract to Caitlin Clark to entice her to play in the Big Three. Of course, there's no doubt that he believes that her skills would translate to the 3-on-3 street ball style that they play in the Big Three. But the financial side is the reason why a female player had the chance to get $10 million from a fledgling yet growing basketball league. Specifically, the $10 million deal was worth 2 years, giving Clark the opportunity to make $5 million a year. In comparison, she's only making $76,535 in the WNBA. Not even the highest-paid WNBA player is making 10% of the money Clark could have been making in the Big Three. Kalia Copper and Jewel Lloyd are making nearly $242,000 a year. While that's good money compared to any other profession, that pales in comparison to what NBA players make at the minimum salary. Meanwhile, the $5 million a year offer that Clark got in the Big Three is several times bigger than an NBA minimum salary. That means that the Big Three believed so much in Clark that they were willing to turn her into an instant multimillionaire in a year. Ice Cube, of course, justified the reason why he offered such a huge contract to one of the biggest names in the world of basketball. In the All the Smoke podcast with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, Ice Cube said,
"We've looked at our guards over the years and the size of our guards and said, that's a position that if a female was to play in the Big Three, that would be a position that they would probably, of course, if she joined our league, it would it would lift the league to new heights.
As explained by Ice Cube himself, it's clear that the biggest reason why he and the Big Three League offered a huge contract to Clark was the fact that he knew that she could bring people into the league and make it into an even bigger entity. We know that the Big Three, while quite popular, is more of a niche league than an actual professional league. Players join this league to have fun more than anything, and that's why fans love watching the down-to-earth nature of this streetball league. But if Clark had joined the Big Three, it would have turned it into one of the most popular leagues in the world, attracting men and women alike. It's true that $5 million is a lot of money to offer any basketball player, even in the NBA, where only proven veterans can get $5 million a year. Still, Clark's magnetism would have brought more money to the Big Three than the $5 million she would have been earning a year. The ticket and merchandise sales would be off the charts, especially when you see a female guard going up against grown men and shooting three-pointers over their heads. And a lot of those Big Three players aren't slouches. For instance, the 2023 Big Three MVP was Joe Johnson, one of the best isolation players in the NBA during the 2000s. So, if you could get Clark playing with grown men who've seen and done it all in the NBA, it would be a sight that no one has ever seen before. It would turn the league into one of the biggest spectacles in the world of basketball, attracting audiences from different parts of the country and allowing the Big Three to evolve into a bigger and more lucrative league. Ice Cube saw her as the golden ticket that the league needed to get to another level of popularity. It's not just about the tickets and the views, but also the merchandise. Jerseys and other merch would be flying off the shelves if they had Caitlin Clark's name on them. To give you some insight, WNBA merchandise is up 500% during the 2024 season, and you'd have to believe that a huge reason why that number is so ridiculous is because of Caitlin Clark's jersey sales. Imagine what kind of an impact she would have been making on the Big Three with her jersey and merch sales. Even if Ice Cube and the people over at the Big Three sold her merch at premium prices, they would still fly off the shelves because of her popularity. Another reason why the Big Three offered such a huge contract was to protect their interest. If Clark was locked into $5 million a year, there would be no reason for her to be playing in the WNBA or overseas because she would be making enough money to take a rest after every season. Still, the ultimate goal for any competitor like Clark is to play at the highest level of professional basketball, which is the WNBA instead of the Big Three. But in the Pat McAfee show, Ice Cube reiterated his desire to get Clark into the Big Three, saying that it's possible for her to play in both this league and the WNBA.
10 weeks if you want to win a championship, 8 weeks if you plan on, not making the playoffs. So, we always sign players for the 10 weeks thinking they'll make it to the end.
So, if you look at it, the Big Three doesn't last too long, and they only play during the weekends, making it possible for Clark to possibly juggle between the two leagues and make a full-time commitment to the WNBA after the end of the Big Three season. There's also the possibility of the WNBA giving her special treatment so that they could accommodate her desire to play in both leagues at the same time, possibly adjusting the schedule of the Indiana Fever games so that they don't clash with the schedule of the Big Three. But as we all know, Caitlin Clark pursued her WNBA dreams and didn't play a single game with the Big Three, making it clear that she declined Ice Cube's offer. Of course, you'd be wondering why she declined the offer to earn under $100,000 a year in a league that's barely profitable. Anyone would want to earn $5 million playing a style of basketball that isn't as demanding as the 5-on-5 style they play in the WNBA. Clark would have been happy sitting at home after the Big Three season, knowing that she already earned $5 million. But why would she decline a lot of money on the table to play for the WNBA? Clark never actually addressed the Big Three offer outright, or talked to people whether or not she was willing to accept the offer. She just quietly declined it by making it clear she was going to the WNBA. Of course, there are a lot of factors that may have forced her to turn the offer down. In her podcast, the NBA 2K host Rachel Demita said,
I feel like maybe at this point in time in her career, playing in the WNBA while simultaneously playing in another league, maybe at this point in her career is just a little bit too much to handle.
She was obviously talking about the busy schedule that Clark has been on ever since the start of March Madness. Remember that she hasn't been able to rest since the start of the NCAA tournament, playing games non-stop and making guest appearances on TV shows and filming commercials. She hasn't gotten time to rest and refocus herself on the things that matter the most to her, such as basketball and her family. This explains why she struggled during the start of the 2024 season, going for a lot of turnovers and not hitting the shots she would normally hit. Right after the long Olympic break, Clark went for ridiculous performances and led the Indiana Fever to better performances because she now had time to rest and focus on the task at hand. So, In Demita's words, it's likely that Clark didn't want to handle the pressure of adjusting to two different leagues at the same time while traveling non-stop and playing a lot of games. The WNBA and the Big Three have different rules. While the gist of basketball is to dribble the ball and make it go into the hoop, different rules and styles can mess up a player's rhythm. As we saw, Clark even made a huge adjustment from college to the WNBA, even though there aren't a lot of differences between the two. You could just imagine how much she has to adjust between the Big Three and the WNBA. Then there's the load management part. If you're Caitlin Clark, money isn't always the bigger goal. You want to make sure you maximize your career as much as possible so that you can also maximize your income-making window. For most players, the income window lasts only a few years. Star players, meanwhile, get to play in the WNBA deep into their 30s. So, if you're Clark, your goal is to make a lot of money every year until you're almost 40. Playing in the Big Three, meanwhile, can throw a wrench in those plans. The load on her body would be too much to the point that she wouldn't have enough time to rest and recuperate. We've seen what too much load can do to an athlete's body. The heavier the load, the less likely that a certain player would be able to have a prolonged career. So, in Clark's case, playing in the Big Three would mess up her load management and shorten her career. Then there's the financial side. To be honest, the money that Clark is making in the WNBA is chump change compared to her endorsement deals. This isn't the same as the NBA, where players get more money from their contracts instead of their endorsements. In Clark's case, however, she's been making a lot since her college years. Thanks to the NIL, Clark made over $800,000 with her deals with Gatorade, Nike, and State Farm, among others. And that was when she was in college. She's been making a lot more since moving on to the WNBA as a pro. Clark's new deal with Nike allows her to make $28 million over the next 8 years, giving her a whopping $3.5 million every year. That's only one of the big endorsements she has. Her other endorsements may not be paying as much as Nike does, but we can be sure that her total revenues amount to more than $5 million. In other words, Clark knew that she could still make the money the Big Three was offering her without having to spend time between the WNBA and Ice Cube's ambitious league. If you look at the fact that she can do this for the next 15 years, it becomes insane to imagine just how loaded she would be when it's all said and done. But if she played in the Big Three and possibly shortened her career, that money-making window wouldn't be shortened. Meanwhile, the media attention she's getting in the WNBA is far better than the one she would have gotten in the Big Three, which isn't the most popular basketball league in the country. So, by getting more media attention in the WNBA, she is maximizing her profits. Then there's the legacy aspect. Even if she would become a worldwide phenomenon playing in the Big Three, that's not the kind of legacy she wants to build. If you're the greatest women's player in college basketball history, you'd want to carry that over to the WNBA and turn yourself into the greatest player the game has ever seen. Clark wants to build a legacy, not only as the possible GOAT of women's basketball, but also as the trailblazer who changed the game. Remember that Clark is the reason why so many people have been watching the WNBA today. She's basically the one who drives the league's growth into a rapid upward trajectory. So, even if she doesn't end up with the stats and accomplishments that could surpass the league's all-time greats, she could at least be happy to know that she was the one who allowed the women of the league to eventually earn millions annually. On the other hand, she wouldn't be making the same legacy with the Big Three. It would always be a question of what if for Clark if she played for the Big Three instead of going to the WNBA. People would forever be wondering what could have happened if she hadn't taken the money in that growing 3-on-3 league and simply decided to build her legacy and fortune in the WNBA. Fortunately, she chose the WNBA, where she has the chance to build a legacy that doesn't only include numbers and awards, but also long-term growth for a league that's been losing money and is dying to see someone driving the popularity upward. Ice Cube, of course, had already accepted the fact that Clark wasn't going to play with them anytime soon, or possibly in the future. He had moved on from Clark's decision to play in the WNBA, saying that they know how to take no for an answer. And while we do know that Ice Cube certainly lost a money-making magnet, there are still more opportunities for the Big Three to grow in the future. On the other hand, the WNBA only has this opportunity to grow, and that's why it has to bank on Clark's popularity more than ever. But it's sad to see that the league hasn't exactly been kind to Clark ever since she entered the gates. It's been quite clear that not everyone's happy with the attention and money that she's been getting. We've seen veteran players, analysts, and legends speaking their minds about the Caitlin Clark phenomenon, and not a lot of those were positive. Sheryl Swoopes and Diana Taurasi have been quite vocal about how they don't really like the fact that this young girl is now getting more attention than anyone else in the history of the league combined. They've been very outspoken outspoken about their opinions about Clark and the entire fanfare driving her popularity upward. Even the current WNBA players haven't been too kind to her. We've seen players beating Clark on the floor, possibly out of jealousy for the kind of money she's been making, and the league hasn't been doing anything to protect her. We also saw how USA Basketball infamously left Clark out of the Olympic team during a time when the priority was to help the sport grow outside the US. If you wanted the WNBA to become more global, it would have made sense to bring the most popular female basketball player in the world to the most popular global sporting event. It's not that the league should be giving her special treatment. It's just that there should be some level of concern about the treatment she's been getting from different people, especially when they should be more thankful to her for giving the league a chance to grow rapidly. This is where it becomes clear to some people that the WNBA may be squandering off its chance to help the league turn into a bigger spectacle. If the league fails to make Clark happy and simply allows other women to beat her on the court or criticize her off camera, they could risk losing her to a rival league in the future. So, this is where you might be wondering whether or not she was right in turning down the Big Three offer. Ice Cube said himself that they were going to protect Clark in the Big Three because she's a woman playing against grown men. The fact that he himself said those words means that he was willing to give her special treatment to help the league grow. And that's not all. On top of the $10 million he was willing to offer Clark, she was also going to earn a lot of money from merch sales and other streams of income. Her offer included a 50% stake in merchandise sales and a stake in the league's documentary. There were also talks of her eventually owning a Big Three team in the future. So, it's clear that Ice Cube wanted to go all in on his offer to Clark, realizing that she could bring in more revenue to the league if he took good care of her and made her happy. The WNBA, meanwhile, hasn't been doing that at all. Of course, Clark hasn't been asking for preferential treatment. It's just that she might realize that she would have been happier making a lot of money in the Big Three while relaxing her way in a league that values what she brings to the table. At the end of the day, however, it's all about legacy instead of money. If you're Caitlin Clark, there are other ways for you to make a lot more money outside of what the Big Three offered. But legacy is something you can't build anywhere else. So, by choosing the WNBA, she made the best choice for her career and legacy as a basketball player. The verdict is still out as to whether or not it's the best decision financial-wise, but we do know that someone of her caliber can make a lot of money in a lot of different places. As to the WNBA, it should be good time for the league to realize that Caitlin Clark made her choice because she values what the league could bring to her legacy as a player, and not because of how much she could earn. And this is the right time to make sure that people all over the league start appreciating what Clark has done to make it bigger. After all, Clark can always leave if she doesn't feel appreciated.